travel is supposed to be freedom. Airplane, new places, new people, unforgettable memories. But sometimes what you bring back isn't a souvenir. It's a scar. Think about it. We all dream of escaping routine. Hopping on a bus, a train, or a plane, chasing adventure somewhere far from home. And most of the time, it's exciting. It's fun. It's exactly what we need. But every so often, those postcard-perfect trips take a very dark turn. And when you're far from home, surrounded by strangers, and stripped of everything familiar, you realize just how terrifying the world can be. That's why tonight's stories hit a little differently. They aren't about haunted houses or creepy forests you can avoid. These are about the moments when adventure itself betrays you. When the road you're so eager to take leads somewhere you'll wish you never went. In the first story, you'll hear about a backpacker who ignored the locals' warnings in a quiet mountain town. He just wanted to explore, but curiosity led him onto a trail that no one returns from. Then we'll dive into a chilling tale of three friends on a road trip. The music was blasting, laughter filled the car, until they picked up a hitchhiker with a smile that never disappeared. And by the time they realized what was wrong, it was already too late. And finally, a family getaway, the kind we all picture as safe and joyful. Except their hotel wasn't just too good to be true. It was something much worse. Because in this place, no one ever really checks out. So, before we get started, if you love true horror stories and want more nights filled with shivers down your spine, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, pack your bags carefully. Because once we leave, there's no going back. He was the kind of traveler who couldn't sit still. The type, restless, always chasing something beyond the ordinary. For him, hostels, landmarks, and guided tours felt fake, too polished. He wanted what other people didn't see, the hidden, the raw, the real. That's what led him to a tiny mountain town abroad, tucked so far off the main road that tourists rarely even noticed it on the map. Cobblestone streets, crooked houses, and locals who kept their heads low when strangers passed. To him, it was perfect, remote, mysterious, exactly the kind of place he thought would give him a story no one else could tell. But here's the thing about chasing stories. Sometimes you catch one you can't escape. At the local tavern, he asked about hikes, trails, any hidden spots not on tourist brochures. The room fell uncomfortably quiet. People exchanged glances, muttered under their breath. Finally, one man pointed him toward the hills but warned him to stick to the marked paths. That should have been enough, right? But then he overheard two locals whispering about another trail. Path not on any map. The forbidden one. His heart lit up with curiosity. If everyone avoided it, maybe that's exactly where he'd find the authenticity he craved. When he asked directly, the locals grew uneasy. One old woman, her back hunched and her eyes pale with age, grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. She whispered, "The forest doesn't let everyone come back." Chills ran through him, but only for a moment. Then came the grin. To him, it sounded like the beginning of an adventure. The next morning, he packed light, ignored the official trails, and followed the vague directions he pieced together from overheard conversations. First, it was just a hike. The air crisp, the trees towering, sunlight flickering through branches. But soon the forest shifted. The birds stopped singing. The wind no longer rustled the leaves. It was as if the entire forest had paused, holding its breath. Then came the stone piles, small, carefully stacked cairns. At first, he thought they were trail markers, until he noticed something off. Each pile had a small, crude carving of a human face etched into one of the rocks. And each face seemed twisted. Open mouths, hollow eyes, silent screams. Still, he pressed on. Because that's what curiosity does. It blinds you until it's too late. After an hour, he stopped dead in his tracks. Ahead of him stood a crooked tree with a lightning scar running down its trunk. He recognized it immediately, because he'd already passed it. Confused, he kept going, swearing he was moving forward. But then, there it was again. The same tree, the same scar. It was like the forest had folded in on itself, pulling him in circles. By now, his chest was tight, his hands clammy. He tried retracing his steps, but every direction led him back to the same place. Then came the whispers. First, faint. Just the sound of wind, he thought. But the words grew sharper, curling around him in a language he didn't recognize. He spun around, no one was there, until he saw it. A figure far ahead, moving between the trees. Too far to make out details, but close enough to know it wasn't an animal. It didn't move naturally. Each step was slow, deliberate, as though it knew he was watching. He shouted. His voice cracked in the silence. The figure didn't respond, just slipped deeper into the woods. Against every instinct screaming at him to stop, he followed. The sun sank lower. Shadows stretched. By the time he realized he was lost beyond saving, night had already fallen. His phone had no signal. His flashlight battery was dying. His last words weren't spoken, they were written. In his travel journal, found later at the base of that lightning-scarred tree, scrawled in shaky handwriting. Something is walking with me. It's not letting me leave. The next morning, search parties went out. Locals knew what they would or wouldn't find. No body, no belongings, just his camera lying in the dirt. When the police developed the photos, most were normal. Trees, paths, his smiling face. But the final photo froze their blood. He was standing in front of that scarred tree, holding the camera out for a selfie. He was smiling, carefree. But behind him, a pale, skeletal hand was resting firmly on his shoulder. And if you're wondering, no one ever figured out whose hand it was. So, what do you think? Would you have turned back when the old woman gave her warning? Or would curiosity have pulled you forward too? Let me know in the comments. And while you're down there, hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, the next story is even darker. There's something both exciting and terrifying about late-night road trips. The world feels endless. The highways stretch like ribbons into nothing, and you and your friends are invincible. At least, that's what 3 college friends believed when they set out on their weekend getaway. They had the car packed with snacks, playlists loaded with their favorite songs, and the kind of laughter that only comes from youth and freedom. For hours, they sped down empty highways, passing through ghost towns and gas stations that looked like relics from the past. But as the night dragged on, excitement slowly shifted into unease. The roads got lonelier, the gas stations fewer, and the silence between towns stretched longer than any of them expected. Then, they saw him, a hitchhiker, standing by the roadside. At first, he looked like any other traveler, a backpack slung over his shoulder, his thumb raised in the universal sign. But there was something about him, something off. His posture was stiff, his face hidden in shadow. The driver hesitated, muttering, "We probably shouldn't." But the other 2 insisted, "What's the worst that could happen? People do this all the time." Besides, he looked harmless enough. So against better judgment, they slowed down and let him in. The moment he slid into the back seat, the mood changed. He thanked them in a low voice, barely above a whisper, and then, nothing. Silence, except for the smile. He sat with his hands folded neatly, staring out the window. His lips stretched into a wide grin that never faltered. No small talk, no questions, just that unnerving smile. At first, the friends tried to laugh it off. Some people are just awkward, right? But soon, the silence felt suffocating. The only sound in the car was the hum of the engine and the occasional, shallow breath from their passenger. Then, things got stranger. The hitchhiker started speaking, not about himself, but about them. He mentioned the driver's hometown, the name of one friend's childhood dog, a story the other had told only once years ago about sneaking out in high school. They exchanged nervous glances. They had never told him these things. How could he know? At their next stop, a lonely gas station glowing faintly against the black sky, one of them stepped inside to buy drinks. On his way back, he froze. Through the glass of the station's window, he saw the car parked by the pump. But only the 3 friends inside. No hitchhiker, no smiling face. And yet, when he opened the door, the hitchhiker was there, grinning, as if he had never left. That's when fear really set in. Back on the road, the atmosphere grew heavy. The hitchhiker still hadn't moved, hadn't stopped smiling. But now faint noises came from the back seat. Not words, not breaths, scratches, whispers, like something pressing against the car's frame from the outside. Except the sound came from right behind their seats. One friend finally snapped, demanding, "Who are you?" The hitchhiker didn't answer. He only started humming. And that's when the driver nearly swerved off the road, because the song was one he recognized. A lullaby his mother used to sing when he was a child. A song that had haunted his dreams as a kid, twisting into nightmares. A song he hadn't heard in years, and never, ever told anyone about. The humming grew louder. The smile never faded. Panic took over. The driver pulled the car to the side of the road, yelling at him to get out. The doors unlocked. The hitchhiker didn't move, so they turned, ready to drag him out. But the back seat was empty. No one there. The three friends froze, their chests heaving, eyes wide. They could feel it, the air thick with something unseen. Then suddenly all four car doors slammed shut at once, the locks clicking down on their own. Something was still inside with them. The driver floored it. Miles blurred by in a haze of adrenaline and terror. They didn't speak. They didn't look back. Only when the first hint of dawn touched the horizon did they dare to stop, stumbling out of the car, gasping for air. They never spoke about it again. The friends survived. But none of them ever drove at night again. They refused. And for years they managed to bury the memory, until one of them, years later, was driving alone through a different stretch of highway. There, in the corner of his headlights, stood a man with a backpack. His posture stiff. His lips curled into that same impossible smile. Waiting. So, if you're ever on a lonely road and you see a hitchhiker smiling just a little too wide, ask yourself, would you stop? Or would you keep driving? Let me know in the comments. And while you're here, don't forget to hit subscribe, because trust me, the last story might just change the way you look at hotels forever. Family vacations are supposed to be safe. The laughter, the sightseeing, the late-night pizza in a hotel room. But sometimes safety is nothing more than a thin illusion, and this family learned that in the worst possible way. They were just an ordinary couple with 2 kids, on their way to a bustling tourist city for a long weekend. Every hotel they checked online was fully booked. Prices were high, rooms sold out weeks in advance. But then, almost by luck, they stumbled on one listing that still had vacancies. Cheap, convenient, and just a short drive from all the attractions. It seemed like a blessing. When they pulled up to the hotel, though, something felt off. The building stood tall and gray, its windows dark even in daylight. The lobby was spotless but eerily empty, the silence broken only by the sound of their own footsteps. And yet, the staff greeted them with unsettling enthusiasm. Too eager. Wide smiles that lingered too long. The receptionist handed them a key with both hands and whispered, "We're so glad you're staying with us. Not everyone chooses this place anymore." That should have been their first warning. Their room looked normal at first glance. 2 beds, a dresser, a bathroom. But the longer they stayed, the stranger it felt. The windows were nailed shut. No latch, no way to open them. And when they looked closer, there weren't any mirrors. Not in the bathroom. Not in the bedroom. Not even in the hallway outside. The husband joked that maybe the owners were quirky. The kids laughed it off. But by nightfall, unease had settled in. As they wandered the hallways, they noticed other guests. Or at least, people standing in the doorways. They didn't speak, didn't smile. They just stood there, motionless, staring as the family walked by. That night, the youngest child woke up crying. He swore someone had been standing at the foot of his bed, watching him breathe. The parents searched the room, checked the locks. No one was there. At least not that they could see. The next morning, while unpacking, the mother opened the closet to put away their clothes and froze. Inside were old suitcases. Not theirs. Dusty, worn, tagged with faded airline stickers from decades ago. Clothes still folded neatly inside. Belongings from strangers who had never come back to claim them. Her stomach sank. She didn't tell the kids. She just quietly shut the door. By the second night, they were done. They decided to check out first thing in the morning, cutting the trip short. But when they went to the front desk to leave early, the staff blocked the exit. Smiling politely, they said, "Oh no, you haven't finished your stay yet." That was when the lights flickered, then went out. The building plunged into darkness. From the hallways came screams, dozens of voices shrieking, crying, wailing. The sound of hands pounding against doors, feet dragging across floors. The family huddled together, clutching the children, their hearts racing. They bolted, down the hallway, through the stairwell, banging on locked doors as shadows moved closer. Figures flickered in the dark. Pale shapes, faces too blank, eyes too hollow. The children cried as cold hands brushed against their shoulders, pulling at their clothes. Finally, in pure desperation, the father grabbed a chair and smashed it against one of the nailed windows. The glass shattered, shards raining down as the family climbed through and tumbled onto the wet pavement outside. When they looked back, the building was dark, silent, as if nothing had happened. They reported everything to the authorities the next morning. But when the police went to investigate, they found something impossible. The hotel had been abandoned for decades, boarded up, condemned. Locals said no one had stayed there in years. And yet, the family had the room key, the receipt, and memories they would never forget. The strangest part? Months later, the father, still shaken, searched for the hotel online. He found it still listed on travel sites. And every year a new review would appear. Always the same words. Great stay. Never wanted to leave. And before we head into the outro, let me remind you, if you're enjoying these stories, hit that subscribe button and join the community. Because there are plenty more dark corners of the world to explore together. Travel is supposed to make us richer. Not in money, but in memories. The thrill of the unknown. The taste of something different. The feeling of being untethered from routine. But as we've just seen, the road doesn't always give back what we expect. Sometimes it takes more than it gives. Think about it. The traveler who stepped onto the wrong trail never came back. A single choice, a single step in the wrong direction, and the unknown swallowed him whole. Then there were the friends, laughing and singing in the car, believing their road trip was just beginning. One decision, picking up a stranger, turned their freedom into fear. That smile in the passenger seat wasn't a sign of friendship. It was a warning they ignored. And finally, the family who thought they had found paradise. A hotel too perfect, too polished, too quiet. They thought they were checking in for rest. But what they really checked into was a nightmare that didn't want them to leave. These stories tie together in one lesson. Travel changes us. But the world doesn't always change us for the better. Sometimes it leaves marks you can't see, scars you can't forget, and questions that will never be answered. So the next time you're packing your bags, ask yourself, do you really know where you're going? Do you really know who you're trusting? And do you really want to know what waits in the shadows of places that don't make the guidebooks? Because the truth is, not every journey has a return ticket. So if you love stories like these, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Join me on the next trip into the strange, the terrifying, and the unforgettable. Turn on the bell too, because the next story might be darker than this one. And trust me, you won't want to miss it. Remember, the wrong trail, the wrong passenger, the wrong hotel. It only takes one mistake. So travel carefully, my friends, because some trips you don't come back from.